Rabi Qasha Ephraim, thank you so much for coming on my channel. I'm very honored to have you.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here.
Thank you. So, for anyone who doesn't know Rabi Qasha, which I'd be surprised if people don't know, Rabi Qasha was the priest in San Francisco, and now you are in Russia. Were you were in LA before San Francisco too? Yeah,
I grew up in LA.
Okay. And he's in the the Assyrian Church of the East, in Russia. I think near the southern part of the country. Tell us how are you doing, Rabi Qasha? How are our Surai people in Russia and the church there?
No, we're doing great. It's coming up on a year in a few days, and the city I'm in is Rostov-na-Donu, which is kind of the capital of the southern region of Russia. It's a pretty big city, and it's one of the three big cities that Assyrians are in. Moscow, of course, has a big diaspora in it, and then Krasnodar, which is just south of me by a couple hours, also has a pretty big Assyrian community. It has a really nice church, and Moscow also has a nice big church and a priest. And the Rostov was the kind of third major Assyrian population spot that doesn't have a priest. And each one of these cities has circles of smaller towns or cities that have Assyrian population. So a couple hours north from where I'm at is Shakhti, and there's 500-600 or more houses. There's a number of other kind of smaller pockets like that. So it's underserved. The Assyrians here are of two, let's say, groups. One that came in during the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then another group that comes in at the late Soviet period, moving in from the Armenian Soviet Republic to Rostov. And so we have kind of a community that's divided between the two. You have people who are very Russified in terms of language, but they've been here a very long time, and people who came from villages in Armenia where they still speak Assyrian. They're Assyrian villages. Now, you have to understand when you're talking about Russia and the former Soviet Union, that while Orthodoxy is very strong here, during the Soviet period, Bibles were very difficult things to get a hold of. So it's common when I speak to priests about their first experiences of Christianity or the scriptures. It's like one priest said, I grew up in a very believing family. We had a Church Slavonic Bible that people would pass around, and that was held very like a very precious thing. It was pre-revolutionary, hidden away. And the other one is they would get their hands on like a copy of the Gospels on a trip to Moscow as a philologist who got a hold of that and was able to, sneak that away and study the Gospels.
Wow. And for obviously the older community, their Russian is native by now, but the other community, how is it? How are they with the language with
With
Russian?
Russian,
Yeah.
Assyrians do very well with Russian because even in Armenia, our villages are the village schools are traditionally Russian schools.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So the level of literacy is very high. I think both you and I grew up in churches where we were kind of the English speaker, and
Mhm.
most of the people, even when they're discussing American, you know, money and structures and the kind of the business of church, they'd be translating into Arabic or Farsi and discussing it in Arabic and Farsi. No, here everyone's fluent in Russian. Everyone has the Soviet education system was very strong. The Russian education system's pretty strong, and so level of literacy is very high. It's one of the difficult things with getting used to Russia. It's because they tend to use a higher register of Russian than I'd say we use English. So it's like you have to get used to people kind of not holding back. And I think in English we're used to speaking in this kind of, you know, Jethro principle of journalism where you're supposed to speak at a third grade level, and Russians are fully doing the first year of college. Like that's just how they talk. And
Wow. Wow. Okay. And then, is there between, say, the populations near the Assyrian communities, and the communities there, and then also with the Assyrians, is there any kind of like um, differentiating? You're Assyrian, you're not Slavic, or you're. Is this a thing, or?
so the identity of the Russian Federation is as a multi-ethnic federation.
Yeah.
And America is a melting pot where
Hmm.
everyone is told to kind of get bathed in Kraft mac and cheese and become this big American kind of casserole, right? Russia has strong ethnic groups. Every major city has ethnic communities that are well represented. And when there are issues, the issues tend to be much more fronted, centered, dealt with. It's not everyone speaks Russian, yes, but an Armenian is an Armenian, an Assyrian is an Assyrian, Slavic Russian is a Slavic Russian, and I like that a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
it's kind of
Yeah,
cool because
I
um,
agree.
and it's, but you certainly don't have this kind of like whitewashed Islam that you would get in America, where you get this kind of like liberal Islam weird blend. And I saw that at Berkeley a lot. Like
Mhm.
here, no, each person's themselves.
Right, right, right. And then what about on like a religious level? Like, is there ever kind of, oh, you guys are not um, you know, uh, Eastern Orthodox or Melkites or whatever they call themselves there. Is there kind of you're different than us, or is it, oh no, you're Christians like we are, kind of a
I've
thing?
heard different experiences from different priests.
Okay.
So there, first of all, there's a distinction between how it's done, what a layperson experiences,
Mhm.
where they're never treated as heretics or anything like that. Um, uh, but at the level of like a seminary, I've heard of experiences where the Russian faculty might not know what to do with an Assyrian.
Mm.
And to be fair to them, that's something we're just broaching.
Yeah.
And I understand their perspective. It's not comfortable to us, but that's part of the kind of getting to know each other, is that initial like, wait, isn't this like a heretic? And what am I supposed to do? Like, you know, like he doesn't feel like a heretic, and I know he's kind of orthodox-ish.
Yeah.
I don't want to like this isn't like a Lutheran showed up. I get that,
All right.
um, but and it's harder because we're so close. Like you can sense the orthodoxy, and
Mhm.
then as faculty or at the higher level, what I've experienced personally has been always, I say we're Orthodox, we're accepted as Orthodox. I think most of the clergy of the Russian Church will respect how you want to be perceived. And I think that if you're strong as an Assyrian Christian in your faith, you understand that, look, there's a larger Orthodox world that is the Church of Christ at some level. Let's not, go into completely without even having to go into the level of, the details of the church fathers, where we can look at each other and say, 1,500 years after these breaks in communion happened, a millennium and a half, our faiths are interchangeable, other than the Christological phrases. And that makes you think about these Christological phrases, that maybe they're more of an internal question of, let's call it the greater Orthodox Church or the greater Orthodox family, than they are something that should be treated as, ipso facto, hard breaks, kind of like what we can experience with, Western liberal churches or something. Look how churches how different they can be.
Yeah, you one time you said this, and it was very interesting. I think it's an interesting thing to think about. You said when these Christological formulas were being developed or defined, uh, they were being done so in environments of pressure, political pressure, imperial pressure, things like that, and it wasn't an organic kind of environment to do that in. I think that's a very interesting thing to think about for the churches that are concerned with this question. Are there Shawabiarcha in Russia?
Sure, we all are.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. That's right. That's right. That's so
It would
funny.
be really weird
Yeah.
to do the Gregorian calendar here. It would, as a test, my kids had school. They go to an Orthodox school, and it was not a feast day. It was not a holy day on their calendar, of course. 25th of December, and I said to some people "Spraznikom," which is like happy feast day, and they're like "Spiridonum," happy Saint Spiridon's day, because they assumed that I was greeting them on Saint Spiridon's feast day.
I see.
Does that
Okay.
make sense? Like there's no, maybe if someone's Polish or Italian or something, someone will show off how worldwide they are and go "Merry Christmas." Like,
I
see, I
see.
know about that.
Yeah.
No, it's um, the Roman Catholic Church is very small, and the Armenian Church is bigger. If that would be the largest new calendar community, and pretty much everyone else is on the Julian. I love it. It would be really difficult otherwise. You would see, I think, especially with Lent, like when people do Lenten things, they're doing it with the Russian Orthodox community. So I even know Armenians who go to the Armenian church, but then for Great Lent and Easter fast with the Russians, because the fast is going on. The stores have their fasting calendar. All your favorite restaurants have their fasting part of their menu come out. And like this year, almost, the Western Lent was almost done when we started. And like there's no way you're gonna
Right.
fast and have Easter. And Easter here is huge. Like this, you walk into your Target, and the front end is covered with Easter basket supplies and Coolidge cakes and the little lamps to take home the holy fire. And like, how would you feel if your calendar, like, you live in this country and your calendar didn't, you just give up? You'd be like, no, I'm going with the Russians.
Yeah, no. I think that's a very efficient system. And it's annoying when it's not like that, to be honest with you. um, this coming year, 2025, uh, all the calendars match up anyway. So that's going to be fine. But when like you just said, when it's as different, especially as different as it was this one that just passed, we were like a month and a half after everybody. It was crazy. Um, it's like a completely another season it becomes, and then it doesn't work. And you think like, okay, the theology we can't figure out, or the Christology or whatever, it's taking time. Well, what about it's a holiday? You guys can't match a calendar? It's not that big of a deal. But anyway, so uh that's interesting that it's good, I think, that the Russians are aware of Assyrians and the Assyrian Church of the East and things like this. Unlike here in the West, how many people know what an Assyrian is, or how many people know what the Assyrian Church of the East is? Only our communities know this, but the Khwari, they don't know what that is. So it's interesting for the Russians that they do, and that their church, as far as I know, when I see like these announcements and pictures and things like this, it seems like their church on a synodal level are friends with the Assyrian Church of the East.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So it's hard after a year of being here to get my head out of being here. Like,
Mhm.
and I want to answer completely honestly.
Yeah.
No, the relationship is very good. They never Russians. One thing that happens in the West that Russians don't do, they don't talk down to you or sugarcoat.
Mm.
It's one of their cultural things where they'll tell you exactly how something is, and I feel a very honest welcome. I feel a very that's all I've experienced. But uh, and I think there's a very special natural relationship between Assyrians and Russians here. I think um, we're kind of lined up in a way where uh, it works out to friendship very nicely. Even on, it's always the small stuff that really matters with these cultural things. So the cultures are complementary. Um, uh, Russians are formal. They're kind of European on the outside, but very Eastern on the inside.
Mm.
Um, and that works well, I think, with Assyrians, because Assyrians can be Eastern, but kind of old Ottoman, stiff Eastern.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
And you being a priest in the Assyrian Church of the East, what are kind of the reactions towards you as a clergy from, let's say, like the Russian Orthodox or whoever, versus like a layperson? A layperson, you said they don't really have any issues, but what about for a clergy?
No, for clergy, it's pretty good. They'll ask, like, are we in communion or something? Or they'll usually be wondering, I think, about, what they can invite me to.
I see.
But
Very
like
helpful of them. Yeah.
we stand in their altar,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
They're just wondering, like, do I communion? Do I not communion? What's like, seriously, that's the level.
Yeah. Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, from the viewers, um, uh, Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Church awarded Marawa, of the Assyrian Church of the East, an award, which was a big deal in the relations between the two churches. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think it's natural for churches to have a relationship. During the genocide, the Russian Church uh, and the Russian Empire was helping out Assyrians, backing up Assyrians. Our relationships go, back centuries now. So especially with the church, I think that's it's very good. It's very healthy. Um,
And is there intermarriage? Okay. Okay. And does it? I'm guessing. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing whatever the man is, that's where the family would go. Like, so say if it's a Russian man, then they would be married in the Russian church, or if it's an Assyrian man, they'd marry in the Assyrian church. Is that how it is typically?
Yeah, or whoever cares more.
Oh, okay, got it. Great. So if obviously from the conversation, the trend seems to be a progression in the relations between the two churches, which is great. And then your own life, as you know, an American Assyrian Church of the East priest, Assyrian ethnically, who kind of picked up and moved worlds, right, to live there in Russia. What's that been like for you?
Well, Russia has this thing, and I call it the blackout.
Mm-hmm.
You come here as a visitor, and someone's showing you around, and it's cool and it's neat, and but then you come here on a longer basis. Even you're gonna hang out here for a month or two, and there's this point where everything feels like you're in a blackout. And I think it's just the fact that the language is difficult. The sounds around you, the system around you is so different that it's kind of like when someone's in a crisis mode, and they go into this like tunnel vision, and you have that, and then it opens up, and you discover yourself on the same street corner, and it's actually much more bright and open than you experienced it for a week or two. And I think it's just the amount of information and the difference in how things look, and how they're paced, and the sounds of people speaking. And I've only been here for extended periods after I started learning Russian. So I think also the fact that it's a very difficult language to learn, and your mind is trying to process it, and the information that you're processing just to be functional in it is so much more than if it was French or even Arabic, or it's just the so there's that kind of negative end. The positive end is it's a very advanced country, and like we still write checks in the U.S.
Yeah.
Paper checks, like here. I remember one of the first times I was out on the street, and I guess I'd run out of paper money, and I wanted to buy something out of this 85-year-old woman in a stall on the side of the street, and she's like, "Well, just show me, just take my QR code and send me the money." I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Do you have a Russian account?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Here, let me show you. Here, you just scan this and put in the amount." And she's like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "Well, America." She goes, "Oh yeah, I heard they're kind of further back there." I was like, "What?" Like, yeah, my cousin's there, and he tells me they're funny.
Wow.
So you've got a lot of advanced stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool. The economy structured differently, so you have much more urbanized population, which means a lot more people live in apartments, but it also means that people have a different cost factor. So you have smaller apartments, more often paid off, less cars per person, often nicer or more expensive, let's say. You have this kind of difference in the structure of society. Many more people can walk to the preschool and to the school and to the store than in the States. It's like you want to go from Home Depot to Albertsons, you get in your car.
Mm-hmm.
Here there's people who live without cars their whole life. It's
Right. And then for you to make that, and I'm the area that you're in the south there, I think it's probably one of the nicer parts of the country, in my opinion. I think along the Black Sea, the peninsula, these areas Like they're more for our people, like a Mediterranean type of weather. Um, so and
Mentality, you know,
mentality,
you
sure,
want to drive like a Middle Easterner, you can in my city.
yeah. Yeah. So it's funny, and I told you this before, but I was saying to Soraya years ago. Um, I don't know, whenever the Crimea thing happened originally. Um, I was saying, like, maybe it's not a bad option for our people. Like, we I don't know how good we are at being in America in an acculturation type of sense. We're not okay with a lot of the stuff that's happening here. I don't know if I'm sure you're aware of what happened with the Armenians in Glendale and the protest that was going on there. No? So they were making a big deal. Antifa started attacking them because of the school curriculum, right? So the Armenian parents are upset in the streets protesting the school curriculum. And then Antifa starts attacking the Armenians. And it happened like consecutively for like a week or something. Um, so this type of stuff, and we have big communities, whether San Diego, LA, Modesto, Turlock, New Jersey, Detroit, Chicago, where Arizona, we have a lot of people and or a lot of like centers in the country. And if we are, say, along the Black Sea somewhere, I think maybe that would be a more natural fit for Surai. Um, and I've been saying this for a long time.
I mean, I like the fantasy. I have to see, how close it could be brought into reality. The
Mm.
two difficult things with moving to Russia, number one is the language. Number two is the paperwork.
All right.
U.S. immigration is done by the State Department.
Mm.
Russian immigration is done by the police department.
Okay.
Police think what's safe, so they want just everything in order, and they're not here to help you.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that you couldn't. I mean, this is something that you know. The first thing I would say is important is Russia as a place where modern, normal life happens, and that you don't need Antifa attacking the Armenian parents for not wanting insane curriculum.
Hmm.
You don't need that.
Yeah.
We have modernity here. We have people choosing to go to church or not. We have people choosing to live together before marriage or not, or wait for marriage. We have people having civil marriages and we have people having church marriages. You'll see all sorts of people on the street. But when I talk to people, and especially at the beginning where I was looking for Russian teachers who usually are also English teachers, who usually are also liberals, because they're really interested in, they think watching Friends, for, binge watching Friends is an awesome thing. Like, like what? That's, I get it. Like I had the same thing with Russian. I watched stupid TV shows because, especially at the beginning, I couldn't really enjoy anything more profound. But people, I had a sort of circle of Russian liberals, and one thing I would test them on is how they would react to your normal, let's say, your kind of 1950s mentality. So,
Mm.
girl says, yes, I've been with my boyfriend for, 3-4 years. And I'm like, you live together, you want to get married? Yeah, someday maybe. And you're like, you start calling him her husband. And
Mm.
she's cool, or, you quiz him about the kind of LGBT thing. And the Russian liberal response is, nah, that doesn't really exist over there. That's just something our conservatives say about them. No, nobody does that. Nobody has, a guy that's become a woman teaching in school. Nah, that's not possible. That's just the crazy, propaganda.
That's so funny.
Someone told me that today. That's just propaganda. That does not exist. Um,
That's amazing. And do these things have a platform of any kind in Russia? Like these issues, do they actually are they things that are, you know, they have parades about it, or they have kind of conversation? Like, is it on the TV all the time, like it is for us? It's always everyone's always talking about this kind of stuff, especially in June for some reason. I don't know why.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. No, the last parade I saw in Russia was for Victory Day, which celebrates the first Victory Day parade in 1945 at the end of the Great Patriotic War of World War II.
Right.
And I'd say that's the big national symbol. It's sacrifice and victory, because we all know that Hitler was killing Jews,
Yep.
but you also had part of the Holocaust, which is where they're putting them in camps and burning people. That's Roma people and gay people and all sorts, and some Catholics and communists and all sorts.
Yeah.
And then you also have about 20 million people in the Soviet Union, Slavs, who get killed. So you have about 11 million in the Holocaust. You have about 20 million Slavs, because the death toll from the USSR is 28 million. 8
Right.
million are soldiers.
Yeah.
20 million are civilians.
Yeah. I
So
always I always talk about that. I always say, you know, we talk about, say, the 6 million Jews, or whatever, but the Slavs, just from World War II, you know, systematic, not because what the Nazis did is they considered that the Soviet Union doesn't have civilians. The Soviet Union, because it was communist, therefore everyone is the state. So because everyone's the state, they were all targets by the Nazis. I think 13 million, at least, just in that time, was 13 million of just Slavs. Uh,
mhm.
People don't talk about that very much.
Yeah, I mean, a couple weeks into being here, we were driving to Linta, which is like a big grocery store, and there's these monuments by the side of the road and this kind of turn of the road. And my wife's always kind of, let's go see those, and I'm always forgetting to hit that turn. And finally, we made it, and we're kind of this ravine, and we're walking around it, and then we start realizing, looking at the signs, like 120,000 people were executed and buried here.
Wow. Wow.
So there's these sites around town, and everywhere you go in Russia, there's some monument to World War II, and there's always fresh red flowers in front of it. And Victory Day is really solemn,
Sure.
and the connection between sacrifice and victory, and the kind of the spiritual importance of self-sacrifice isn't lost. So Victory Day is huge. I mean, it just a massive. It's the national holiday, um, and it's one of those things that you should understand about Russia. And I think in many ways it's like a recreation of um, the idea of Easter, originally in a Soviet secularized way. But now it's because now it also kind of falls around the Easter time, this idea of death and resurrection,
Mm.
because it's not that far apart. Long ago, there are still people who uh, experienced uh, that war, um, and it definitely has this like death and resurrection feel to it, and it's a major part of the Russian mentality. And I think one of the things that makes Russia nice to live in, because I think in the States we get to this point where everything's about money, and we're in this thing where we're always having to earn more, because actually having stable money, paying off your house,
Mm.
that's a rarity,
Yeah.
right? um, and uh, there's not this idea of sacrifice, or of community, or of sameness, because we don't share enough things with each other, in terms of that. You have 4th of July, you do fireworks, you eat hot dogs. Um, the Russians have a lot of ritual
Hmm. Okay. So like us, but maybe more, I would guess, because they're older.
because they're Russian. They
Yeah.
just like the rituals.
Right. Right. Um. And we just got a question, and I guess the person tuned in a little bit late. But what would you give a ballpark estimate for how many Surai are in Russia? How many Assyrians?
That would have been easier in the Soviet period because
Mm.
Soviet passports had a page for nationality and there was an Assyrian nationality. Um, and post-Soviet, that was kind of done away with. Um, I'll say in my oblast, so my state, and in my city. In my city, I think honestly, it's about 5,000 ethnic Assyrians. Um, in my oblast,
Mm.
and probably about 1,000 within the oblast. Krasnodar is probably about the same, and maybe Moscow a little less. If you're looking it up online, there's the 2010 census figures, and they don't make a lot of sense. Um, it's just really hard to figure that number out.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Um. So the lower half of, let's say, under 20,000, maybe.
I'd say 20. We'll see.
Okay.
It could be 20 to 60.
Okay.
That's the thing. It's 20 to 60. It's somewhere like that.
Yeah. So we'll leave it like that, 20 to 60,000. Um. So I want to do more about your experience in Russia and how that's been for you and for your family. But people keep asking in the chat other questions. So let's see if
You can bounce me around.
yeah. How's the assimilation situation looking like? I've heard Tromaye are the only ones still speaking it there. I mean, maybe he means still speaking Surat. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Moscow, he's probably speaking about. My
Mm.
town, they're all Urmichnaya from Armenia. I Rostov and Krasnodar probably compete for Assyrian speakers. I think Rostov is coming up, partly because of people from Ukraine, from Eastern Ukraine coming in.
Mm.
Um, but this is Urmichnaya area. There's Khomnaya and Moscow do tend to speak more. The Moscow community is very Russian speaking. There, I don't think I've communicated to anyone other than the deacons in anything other than Russian.
Mm.
But Rostov, it's no, you can, speaking Assyrian, you can get around pretty far. The younger generation will struggle speaking. I think part of the issue is when you know Russian really well, you get used to thinking with a certain precision, and then you come to Assyrian and you don't have really advanced vocabulary, and you feel like you shouldn't speak because you don't have the right word. Where it's like, well, that's everywhere. Most Assyrians, they speak at a simpler level than they don't speak like priest Assyrian.
Of course. And you do the slotha, the raza in Lishana Atiqa, right? Yeah. Yeah.
That's normal here because the Russians are doing it in 9th century Bulgarian. They're
Yeah.
doing it in Church Slavonic anyway. I mean, it's people know it. Like
Yeah.
it's not people who go to church all the time have kind of picked it up.
Yeah. So I remember one time talking to you, you were telling me like the standardization of our language um, could go back to that rather than these kind of diverse village accents. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, this was the problem for Greek when in the 80s they went to uh, kind of modern Greek, Demotikos. Well, you were speaking Katharevusa that let you access Plato and um, an ancient, a whole history of the Greek language, and now you're training people in a language that cuts them off from their heritage. Well,
Yeah.
it's like, great, you're teaching someone Syriac in such a way that they can't read anything in Syriac. Great, you can't read St. Ephraim,
Yeah.
but you just spent all this time reading, learning a language that's like, what for?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. What's the point of it if you can't use it? You can't read, Saint Ephraim or anybody. Absolutely. Um, do you? This is going to be a funny question, but do you have to deal with Ashurists in the Assyrian community in Russia? Is that a thing?
I think because the community is isolated, it's not isolated, let's say, it's just that it hasn't gotten a lot of foot traffic.
Mm,
Um, when I've been able to, I think it's difficult to really argue with me
mm.
big time. Um, I, you know what I mean? It's just like, I think in the West, there's like, people will be more willing to ignore reason and argument.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um,
Maybe they're just being respectful here.
yeah. I mean, that
I've
I'm
heard
happy.
that stuff, but
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy to hear that. So back to the living situation there for our people and for the people in general. Um, do and because Russia's so big, I'm guessing there's like different cultures. I don't mean just like in an ethnic sense, but actual urban culture. So, like for example, let's say if you're from Southern California versus if you're from Nebraska, you probably have a different culture, right? Regardless of your ethnic background. So, is that similar to Russia, and like people from Moscow versus people where you're at, etc.? How does that work?
how we experience life
Mhm.
differs very much.
Mm.
Like if someone was planning on moving here, I take them out to the village that's outside of the graveyard here, that the Syrians are at.
Mm.
It's Stanitsa. It's a Cossack village, and you've got the main strip and little stores and tons of potholes. And if you go down the road long enough, there are horses and cows standing, but beautiful little houses and gardens, and you can really have, for not a lot of money, a nice life there. And they have a certain pace. If you ask someone there, like, hey, I always lose where the graveyard is. I'm always end up in someone's backyard. I'm like, can you point it? It'll get some old lady or kid kind of walking from your car all the way there. And
Mm.
they have their pace because they live. I mean, you could buy a nice house there for like $80,000, $90,000 because it's a
Wow.
tiny village. Um, and then you've got Moscow on the other end, which is an extremely expensive city, an extremely rapid city.
Mm.
Um, at the slowest, the subway works once every 2 minutes, and it heats up to like about every 45 seconds. So, you
Wow.
come down the stairs, you see you missed your train, you get to the platform, the train comes.
Wow.
Yeah,
So then,
Moscow's insane, and that's intense though. That's not like, I wouldn't want to live in that.
right, right, and so I have a friend. He's from Modesto, so he tells me, there's nothing to do in Modesto. It's terrible. It's the middle of nowhere, and I like San Diego much more, etc. And what about, let's say, in these areas? Is it a Modesto type of feel, or is it still um, no? It's like normal, and it's not like hell in the middle of nowhere, like Modesto.
Modesto near me would be a town 2 hours north of here called Shach,
Okay,
the mines. It's
got it.
also known as like the the most well-developed organized crime in Russia, I think. Or it's always hits those lists on those things that, like, But Shakti has that feel. I don't think it's that bad. Um, uh, and you have those kind of places. Rostov is much more New York in its feel. It's the size of San Diego, but it's New York.
Mm.
Uh, like the way the roads work, the way the city feels. What's nice about it is you can at 1 in the morning walk down from my house to the city center, and the most you'll ever see is maybe one drunk guy in a bench.
Yeah.
You'll be completely safe. Last week, my four daughters were driving my wife crazy because they've been home since school's out. So they got on a bus and they went across the river to the big mall and had their shopping day, got back on the bus and came back.
Hmm.
Imagine doing that across LA.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I'm getting a lot of questions about the Melka in the Assyrian Church of the East, in the Sacramental tradition. There is there anything you can comment on that, Rabi?
Melka is one of those things that I really want someone to sit down and go through every reference to um, leaven, to putting fragments of prior Eucharist into the Eucharist. And I want to figure out when this idea really develops. I know there's early Latin mentions of this kind of fermentum of taking the Eucharist from one church and taking it to others.
Mm.
Um, uh, it, I know that it's mentioned uh, mostly in kind of high medieval post 900 texts, and the earlier ones like the Adishu Katraya aren't as like they mention something about preserving uh, the yeast, the khmira. So, um, but things like that, I always think have an ancient connection of some sort.
Mm.
Um, but I'd really like someone to dig into that one.
Yeah, I would recommend everyone asking that question. It's been a few people to check out Marawa's book on the sacraments of the Church of the East. He has a whole chapter for the Melka there, or a whole section. Um, and then someone also brought up probably the crossing in the Assyrian Church of the East. You cross yourselves this way, I think. So
Yeah,
yeah,
right to left.
right. We do it the Syriac Orthodox. We do it the other way.
No
So
way.
yeah, yeah, I do it like left to right. So which is I think the Assyrian Church of the East is similar to the Russians in that they cross themselves the same way. Is there any intentional connection there, or is it just coincidental?
Yeah, I think it's coincidental.
Okay.
I have difficulty separating out on these things, like
Hmm.
the historical and the theological, or maybe because there's usually some kind of practical, thing there that
Yeah,
my instinct is to want to dig into that.
got it. Got it. Yeah, it's interesting to me because the Surai churches, you would think they'd have the same way of doing it because there's nothing really, I don't know. But um now there's another question. Are you aware of any fathers prior to Afrahat? Um I can't think of any by name, but we have records of anonymous writings before him, but I can't think of any actual names of people. Uh, I don't know if
Acts of Ade, Acts of Mary,
yeah, see,
uh,
like these
the
anonymous.
writer of the Apocalypse of young Daniel, the
Mhm.
writer of uh,
The
a
Acts of
whole.
Thomas, the hymn on the pearl. Yeah, 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 sure, sure. The Acts of John. These are all older Syriac writings before.
Well, the question is, when does Messianic Judaism end for the Persian Jewish world,
Hmm.
and Christianity and rabbinical Judaism begin?
Hmm.
because at the point you're going before Afrahad, you're going awfully close to where the Pshita Old Testament is still being written. And I don't know exactly when the division really takes root.
Right. That's a good point. And you see that in Afrahat, whose his Semitic name was probably Yaqub, and his demonstrations, which I recommend to everybody, are very messianic Jewish, as you say. Yeah, he was probably Jewish, who became a Christian.
Hillel, who comes, before the time of Christ into Palestine, comes from Nisibis.
Hmm.
Hillel's successor was the former teacher of the Nisibin Jewish Academy. And, surprise, surprise, you have people like Ephraim who are picking on midrashic elements that aren't from scripture, but sound like the writer takes them as common knowledge.
Right. Yeah. Let's see what we got here. Is the communication between the Assyrian Church of the East and the Russian Orthodox Church still open? Are there plans to further dialogue? How are the Eastern Orthodox reacting to this dialogue between the Assyrian Church of the East and the Russian Church?
Yeah, of course, the dialogue's open. I'm going to it actually next week. That's been doing excellent. Um, the other churches, I don't know if they have reacted really or not. Uh, one of the big things with the dialogue is just maintaining that connection, developing even here. I'd say the biggest thing with the dialogue is developing things here in Russia in terms of like, the Khudra is not something that people pick up and read.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very theological book, and it should exist in an English translation, and it should exist in a Russian translation. But the dialogue is ongoing, and I think it's a very robust dialogue.
Mm. Yeah, I think that the two churches are probably closer now than at any time before, I would say. Especially since 2018, I think it's really picked up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's also, you have to understand the size of the Russian church, and I think a lot of Assyrians don't understand this. It's big. My city has 58 parishes, and my city is considered underserved.
Wow.
It's nothing for a priest to have 5,000-6,000 people that he's serving. When I look at just the amount of population that they consider for a church, it's huge. It's like 80% of the people are baptized here. So that's a lot of a mass, and that's a lot of clergy. Like we received a metropolitan today, the head of external church relations here in Rostov at the local seminary, and the priest who was sitting next to me, I said, "Well, who are the priests?" And he goes, "Oh, they're just the heads of deaneries." We loaded an auditorium, like the full auditorium was priests. He goes, "Oh no, those are the heads of deaneries." He goes, "No, we didn't invite them all. That'd be too huge."
Wow.
It's just a big amount. So when you're having dialogue, you need to also allow time for people to see it in their news, to look up the articles. You want to start addressing the concerns and issues. You're putting you have to have a lot of people process this.
Yeah. How's the food there, by the way?
The quality of products is astounding.
Okay.
Since I've been coming to Russia, I used to always pour milk. My first thing I do, I always rented an apartment, and I'd pour milk, and I'd enjoy the smell because it has this
it's
grass.
real. Final.
It's different. And Russians would laugh at me like, "Oh, you're crazy. You're like one of these weirdos. We've heard of you guys from San Francisco." The quality is good, but they don't do the Middle Eastern like heart attack with every meal.
Mhm.
Like they think the flavor is mayonnaise and carrots.
I see.
So
No, they're in
shawarma
shape.
has mayonnaise and carrots on it.
Yeah, yeah. No, Russians are in shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Russian restaurant here in San Diego. I forgot something pomegranate. I forgot what it's called, but we went there and it was very interesting. My friend loved it. It was like his favorite, but I like the dumplings a lot. I'm not big on like soft, mushy stuff. So yeah, the
Pelmeni.
dumplings are amazing. Um, we have a question here to greetings, Qasha Ephraim. What is the attitude of the church towards evangelization and spreading the faith? Does the church in Russia receive converts? I think he means the Assyrian Church in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, I think evangelization, spreading the faith is good. I would find it very weird to receive converts among what I would consider the Orthodox, let's call it family, or what to me is obviously the Church of Christ.
Mm.
I have no question that the Syriac Orthodox Church is a part of the Church of Christ. I cannot imagine it not being. I have no question that the Coptic Church is the Church of Christ. I have no question that the Russian Orthodox or Serbian Orthodox or the Assyrian Church of the East. That there's just, I look at it and anything that I would say, look, they're heretics. I'm like, wait a second, look at who you're talking about. Even if one of us is mistaken in a phrase and it's not right, it would be to me like dehumanizing, de-Christianizing someone unjustly. Other than that, I reserve opinion.
Right,
You
right,
know,
right.
so for me, I think when you're baptized into a tradition, born into a tradition, you need to live out that tradition.
Right.
You're That's what God needs from you, right? We didn't invent God. We didn't. He created us, so he needs something from us. We're not
Mhm.
the ones needing something from him. I could have not existed. I'd have been fine not
Yeah.
existing. I wouldn't have noticed even. But because he made me, and then he goes over to Moses and he tells Moses what he needs. Before that, he tells Abraham.
Mhm.
Abraham sitting in his father's shop, and then Moses doesn't even want to do this. Moses is really trying to get out of it. Um, and so I have to do unto God because he needs this from me. And what he asked me as an Assyrian is to read the Khudra to him.
Mhm.
So to be an Assyrian is to be the person who has to chant the Khudra before God. To be a Russian, you have what you serve, the Malitva Slav. You have that way of serving before God. And for me to take a Russian and say, you're supposed to sing this Khudra before God, that's your thing. Most likely, really, you need to work out your own faith. Feel free to come, feel free to be enriched. I'm sure there's going to be, let's say you had a full and developed Assyrian parish here in the city, which is what we're trying to get to. So in 10 years, I'm sure there will be Russians who are Russian on the outside and Assyrian on the inside. I'm sure there's going to be Assyrians who are Russian on the inside and Assyrian on the outside, where the spirituality of Russian Orthodoxy, and I have to tell them, go, pick up your Malit Vaslav, do that, because that's really who you are. And it's not necessarily cultural. It can be that there's a very strong connection spiritually with a
Yeah.
form of prayer.
Yeah.
You know, I the Russian form of prayer is so within this sphere, this world of orthodoxy. I see mostly differences that aren't. I wouldn't say someone should convert, but that there are times when um, one finds their salvation in a certain way.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if a typical 55-year-old white guy would be able to walk in and pick up the Assyrian tradition unless he has some extraordinary. It just would be hard.
It would be. You'd have to Assyrianize.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, does Qasha Ephraim think they might establish Russian full communion in the coming few years?
With the Assyrian Church,
Yeah.
no, I don't think it would be next few years. I
Mhm.
think that um, uh, the relationship is going to develop very well, and I think it's Marawa's time. From our side, heading the bilateral commission was incredibly fruitful. I've been with him throughout it. Um, uh, he took something that uh, started quite small, and in the middle of it, Corona happened, and a lot of difficulties from just being able to meet and really developing that relationship, across kind of the cultural divides that are there when you're trying to do something that formal, linguistic divides that are there. He did and that foundation is going to serve us very well. I don't know if communion should even be the immediate goal. I think of it more as mutual recognition of orthodoxy. To me, communion, that's something you do eventually when you first recognize that, look, I can't say that they're not orthodox. My dream isn't communion. It's we recognize each other's orthodoxy in a way where we would never stop each other from joining in choir.
Mm. Uh,
If,
would you say that that's already the case, that they would recognize each other's orthodoxy?
I'd say that's getting there.
Okay.
But there's a bigger project which has to do with you have two large communions, the Oriental Orthodox and the Eastern Orthodox, and you have the Assyrian Church. For the Assyrian Church, it's easy because we can speak for ourselves.
Yeah.
That's why we come off as more friendly, because we can't reinforce our negativity. You know,
Yeah.
uh, for the other two, and I'm not saying I'm not saying anything negative in that, but you have to recognize that dynamic. And this is the big stumbling block: is to say, look, all three of us are Orthodox. We're not rushing into communion here, but we need to recognize some things. Number one, because right now in this world we need allies. The insanity is going to get worse,
Mm.
and the more politically the world divides, the worse it's going to get on one side, because they're not even going to be trying to negotiate anymore. They're not even going to be trying to keep people, it'll be party season.
Sure. Sure.
And so we need each other.
Yep.
If the Armenians are there and they're just there as ethnic Armenians rather than as Orthodox Christians, look at what we've set up. Why aren't why aren't all the American Orthodox rushing to their defense? Because it's an Armenian issue.
Sure.
We need to hear the word Armenian and Assyrian and Antiochian and Syriac. All of this should sound Orthodox to us. And then within the camp, we can beat the heretical daylights out of each other.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like some issues, okay, but I have to recognize this commonality.
Yeah.
Because right now we're talking about it like, look, we know you're a heretic, so we're not even going to talk about it. Well, tell me how you're not a heretic. See, you're a heretic. You can't even tell me that. The other one is to say, look, I don't think you're a heretic, but we've got an issue. And now that issue gets to be resolved kind of in-house.
Mm. Yep. Yeah. That's the in Oriental Orthodoxy we have things like this where the Armenians will use unleavened bread, and we don't. We use leavened bread. And there were letters to each other back and forth about it in history, where we're rebuking each other for using the wrong kind of bread or whatever it is. But it's still in house. You know what I mean? It's not whatever. We're still in communion. We still recognize each other as Orthodox. It's just we're mad at each other for using one kind of bread over the other.
It should go without saying that I'm only speaking for myself.
Of
You
course.
know, I'm no way representing the Assyrian Church officially, and this is just looking at the situation as I experience it. You know, just the as a human being of Orthodox faith. This is, you know, this is my experience,
Yeah.
uh, and I think that, you know, that's the most can have to offer anyway, about the
Sure,
question.
sure. Yeah. I want to. Oh, we have one more question. Qasha Ephraim, what is your thoughts on the Assyrian Church's efforts of rapprochement with the Catholic Church? Thoughts on being partially in communion?
I don't know what partial communion is. I think that, um, uh, the communion thing can get tiring.
Hmm.
And one of the big things is sameness. You have to see if you think the same way. So that also means uh, looking at real uh, uh, directedness of each other's communities. Is there a way where this is something that's organic? Here in Russia, it's very weird for me not to be like Orthodox.
Mm.
Like the Orthodox, like what is Orthodox, because we think the same, we talk the same, we basically teach the same kind of things.
Mm.
We react the same way to the same problems.
Yeah.
If one of us reacts a little different, let's say to a marriage and faith kind of thing, morality kind of thing, we kind of look at them like, oh, that's interesting. You do it that way. You know, it surprised me. But I kind of get that. And I don't know if we have that as much,
Mm.
you know, with Rome. I think there's some differences that are happening.
I think he's referring to here the part by the partiality. It's the agreement with the Chaldeans that exists right now. The pastoral situation there. I think Pierre. I think it's just a pastoral thing. I don't think that's an indication of anything more than that. It's because it's the same community.
Oh,
You know?
yeah, no, that's a pastoral. So anything done pastorally means you're stretching and not to take canonical. You don't make rules off of exceptions.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, there's a right over there. There's a roundabout that spits out onto the street I take to get from the center into my house, and the light on that street's 13 seconds off.
Mm.
So when the and here they have countdown timers. So when I come to it's a red light and it's 13 seconds until it goes green. That's when you go.
Oh, oh
And if
wow.
you stop there, one time I did that, and there was a cop, and he started blinking his lights, and he yelled, "Go!" So he's telling these cops, "Something go through the red light." And the point was, at this light, you go at the red light because the light's off. And if
Mm.
they were to fix that, then everyone would be crashing because now everyone's gotten used to the light being that way. My
Yeah,
point is, that's an exception. That doesn't mean I always go 13 seconds early on a red light.
sure, sure.
You know, a pastoral agreement is not a rule.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a
So
weird
Pierre,
thing. I don't discuss it. It's not a part of the traffic rules.
yes, yeah. So Pierre, the point that is trying to be made here with yeah, and I think Rabi Qasha would agree on the Christology part too. But I think the point that's being made is the difference in worldview. So what is common to, let's say, the fide part of the conversation is not necessarily common to, say, the daily life part of the conversation or the morality. um, the way that the Assyrian Church of the East ethos of uh versus, let's say, you know the West, which is what is associated with. let's say like the Roman Catholic Church, whether it's in Germany, France, Italy, etc.
On a personal level, I would have things that I would want to discuss,
Mm,
and it would not be a very um, it wouldn't be, I think it wouldn't be intellectually very fruitful, but not very much this kind of uh, building closeness kind of experience. It would be more talking about like, well, look how many differences we have.
yeah, and so you know, Rabbi Pierre is coming from, he's at Madanka, as you see from the picture with Mar'awa there, but he's coming from a place of unity for our Suraya people, like from a nationalism perspective. So the Chaldeans being a big chunk of our people, he's asking these questions in the context of a national unity. So being akin to the churches, you know, with
I can answer this question. I got it. National unity means everyone grabbing the, if you're Syriac Orthodox, you'll have to provide the text. If you're Church of the East, the 1960 Trishur Marnar Sai Khudra, and doing that. And understanding that the prayer and fasting and calendar and canon law of the Church of the East stands for itself.
Mhm.
And it's not under some Italian cardinals, whatever. And to live that out authentically. And if we're all doing that, we all share the same culture and identity. And that's what's made us Assyrian.
Yeah,
For 2,000 years, that's what's made us Assyrian. That means for all history. 2,000 years is too long, to go back. You can't go beyond that. That's and I don't have a problem with someone calling themselves whatever, as long as they're. I mean, I know what Syriac is. I know what Assyrian is. People are always finding this Aramean thing fine. I have no problem. I guess I'm, whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
You know, Ahmed,
yeah.
whatever we are. But
Akhil Siraya.
you
Yeah,
have the Fambito, you have the Shhimo, we have the Khudra, you have the Damwatar. If you're doing that, then that's fine. If what you're doing is not authentic, if you've surrendered part of that, stop surrendering it.
Mm.
You fast on Wednesday and Friday. You don't eat meat on Wednesday and Friday. You don't eat meat in Great Lent. If you do, you're cut off. Why? Because in the Takhsa, on the Sultan Khusaya, it's made the same as denying the faith. And there's a reason, because we all do it. So if you go and you have your burger on Wednesday or Friday or Great Lent, you've broken from that thing which we all do.
Mm.
See, we have a commonality. And it's not words. We have these dukhrane. We don't do the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Great for the Latins that they do that.
Mm.
We don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to adopt some things, like, if you wanted to do St. Nicholas because Santa Claus is getting annoying, fine. But we understand why we're doing that. I don't understand why we'd have a feast of the circumcision in an Assyrian Khudra. It doesn't exist in them. We have a Bible that's its own tradition, that has its own Old Testament,
Yeah.
that has its own content. If we're going to chop all that out, this has always been my issue, with Rome. It's like, with Russians, I can say that we could resolve the Christological thing. We could write something like we wrote with Rome, but you don't get let go of these things. These are who you are. These are your connection with God. If I'm going to let go of these, I'll just become a Russian or a Serb or whatever. You can't let go of these things and maintain who you are, because again, who you are is how you talk to God. I talk to God as an Assyrian. Actually, being an Assyrian is someone who speaks to God through the Khudra and the cycle of prayers and fasting and the canons that go with that, how you understand marriage.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Rabbi. And we say in Arabic, "Ash famak," long live your mouth. So thank you for saying these things because you articulated it very well. We have been doing this, like you said, for 2,000 years. We have been saying these prayers in our tradition in Syriac, and we don't need it to be approved by a Nukhraya.
Hmm.
We know the language better than they can teach. They can think that they know the language. Um, does Rome ask to give up these things the Chaldeans use the Khadra to? No.
Nope, because um, if you look at the present usage, um, it's not. I have one of the old Roman khudras. It's not that bad. Mar Yosef Khnanishu used one. It definitely is Romified.
Hmm.
Back then, it was the only one printed, and then once we got our own printed, that's what we all use. And I have a friend who's actually editing a translation of the khudra into English, and he constantly comes up with problems where the Assyrian one is much longer than the one that Clems Dawid edited for the Chaldean Church. Now that one is even being replaced by some newfangled thing.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
So you have like, and um, fasting on Wednesday and Friday is a part of the Khudra. What feast days you do, the way you think through theology. So we have Marbawai. Marbawai writes on Christology, but in his Christology, he deals with the Trinity. How he deals with the Trinity precludes the idea of the Spirit proceeding from the Son.
Mm. Mm.
Because God is simple God, the Son is compound, divine and human, and the Spirit, if it were to proceed from Christ, does it proceed from one nature without the other? That would make you a real Nestorian, like in the heretical sense. No, the
Wow.
Spirit proceeds from the Father as the Son proceeds from is begotten of the Father.
Yeah, this is what we
You know,
say too. Yeah.
yeah, you have these issues. You have to be within your tradition.
Mm.
You have in Rome Aquinas. I love Aquinas. I studied Aquinas. I have a Dominican degree. Aquinas says things like old law and new law.
Yeah.
Well, this is weird to me. I know of the old covenant and the new covenant from Jeremiah. But as far as I can tell, there was one God and one will of God. Now I get this. This 12th century Latin idea of there's the old law and the new law and the destruction of one law. Well, these are theological things that are Latin. And they're within a certain. And then the other thing that becomes part of the Latin trajectory is defining the Bible in a particular way at the Council of Trent. Well, I'm not going to be defined by the Council of Trent. You had the problem with Protestantism, and fine, but your response to Protestant problems
It's
is
not our problem.
it's not my problem.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. We didn't have to deal with that. Exactly. Um okay, and then he says, "Oh man, I didn't know about this. I'll take what I learned. I'll ask our mutual friend Daniel." Thank you, Pierre, for your questions, and thank you more, Rabi, for the time, for the questions. And I'm very honored to have you on with me. Inshallah, we do more in the future, and maybe I'll make a surprise appearance in Russia and visit you there. That'd be awesome.
That
Um,
would be awesome. Uh, I would invite that very much. I invite people to visit Russia. I mean,
mm,
this is the Russian people are the best part of being in Russia. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of cool things. It's neat. Um, uh, the medicine is awesome. The educational system's awesome. But it's the people, and they've been through a lot of tough things, and they have a humility. You come in, you say you're from America, they want to find out all sorts of stuff. It's always, you might have the American government saying, we want you dead, but they're like, oh, you're from America, that's cool. I've never actually met someone from there, or I have family there, but that You don't get a lot of Americans in my taxi. This is, what do you think about this? So it's a great place to visit if you could make it in.
For sure. And thank you again, Rabi. And I think a lot of people are blessed by your presence here on the channel. So hopefully, maybe in the future, we'll have you for more things, and we'll keep in touch. I know Chris Kariakos, if you remember him. I was with him yesterday. He says, I can't wait to see your show with Rabi Qasha. Yeah, and a lot of others. So thanks again, and thank you guys for watching. Pray for us, subscribe, like, share, do all that stuff, and take care, everybody.
Thank you.